I didn't have enough time to process all of that new codex information in time for my previous Crusade game, so I just played it same crew as last time. Supply drop turned out to be a very dicey thing. My Hormagaunts did an amazing job of just screaming across the battlefield and doing some amazing damage, but dropping all that weight on one side of the dice scales was paid back by every objective I took being the one to vanish, and at the end there were just 2 Marines on an objective. If I could just hive guard the hell out of them, we'd be in another draw. The Primaris rolled a sea of 5s and 6s for the armor save and cost me the game in the very last second. A very, very fun game indeed. I love it when it goes right to the wire, end of turn 5, like that. Okay, so, new codex, a quick juggle here. 500 points. The Hormagaunts are way too expensive for what they are, and the Hive Guard now suck. And not only suck, but are really expensive and suck. I do get it though, everyone is sick of the sight of them, so they just want them off the board for a while, and we'll probably get a points drop once the fatigue passes. Hive Fleet Leviathan for transhuman on synapse and mini transhuman on non-synapse, and a single dice reroll for each unit in both shooting and melee phases. Sticking with the Prime and giving him a Venom Cannon, the Reaper of Obliterax and the Warlord trait of Synaptic Tendrils, so it can use Alpha Warrior to reroll wound rolls of a 1 and use it twice. He'll be embedded with a unit of 7 Tyranid warriors, with the now free Death Spitters, and I'm going with dual Bone Swords for the extra attack. 2 of them will be spending 5 points each of a Venom Cannon, and with my few leftover points, I'm going with Adrenal Glands and Toxin Sacs, because the hoist in Gaunt costs means I can't squeeze a small unit in, or even buy a Lictor, which has doubled in cost, although that new profile looks well worth it. The warriors have also gained Battle Hardened, and their battle trait will be Veteran Warriors for reroll 1s to hit. The Neurothrope will have Hive Predator Stratagem to acquire the Warlord trait of Direct Guidance to give a unit +1 to hit. Also, rarefied enhancements to give it the Resonance Barb Relic. And thanks to them now knowing 2 powers and another one from the Barb, he'll have Catalyst and Paroxysm and the new power for Leviathan, which is Hive Nexus, which is a brute, allowing you to poach a Synaptic Imperative and cast it on a unit, while not using up that Imperative, which are only 1 per battle. Then, someone pointed out that you get your Hive Fleet Psychic power in addition to the ones the beastie knows. Cool, let's chuck in Onslaught as well. And then I'm trading out those Hive Guard for 3 Venomthropes. Intrigued, I looked, and this list costs 500 points in the new codex, but when I create it in Battlescribe using the old costs, it's 558. Cheaper and stronger. The mission is Assassinate. The Ultramarines have had enough of the Tyranids and are going to try and take out the Prime to defang them. This is a weird role switch for us. Normally, I'm the one charging across the battlefield to reach the Astartes. Now, they are charging me. No objectives. My deployment zone is half of the battlefield, and my Warlord has to be within 10 inches of the centre of it, and the Primaris are all on the far quarter. Venomthrope lurking behind a ruin so they can float in and tie up the shooting unit. The Neurothrope is nearby to provide Synapse, puff them up with Direct Guidance and Catalyst, and hamper the Marines with Paroxysm and Smites. I also have a cunning plan in store. More on this later. The Warriors and the Prime are off to the side in synaptic range, but making sure the Venom Cannon have a diagonal across the board and getting a bead on the Bolter Brigade. Facing off across the board from them are the Chainsword Fellows that I need to keep at arm's length for as long as possible, and then hopefully the new and massively improved Bone Swords and extra toughness will give them a nasty surprise as the Marines are introduced to the new Tyranid Codex. I have less Crusade points, so that gives me a bonus command point, which I am very certain I will need.
For the Emperor!
The Ultramarines begin their homicidal quest for my Prime, and advance from the Assault Intercessors, and they get a 5. Ouch! Maybe I should have set my guys up further back. Anyway, they run forward and take cover behind the next ruin. The Intercessors roll a little less well, and so they don't quite cover as much ground, and the captain stays with them. Because the Marines are within 24 inches, I activate the Tyranid Prime's synaptic imperative of Guide Mind, and drop a blanket of exploding 6s for missile weapons across everything within synaptic link range. I pondered pathogenic slime for an additional hit on a 6, but decided to save the command points. The Prime places Alpha Warrior, re-rolling wound rolls of 1, on itself and the other one on the warriors. The Neurothrope puts Guide Mind on the Venomthropes for +1 to hit, tries the Cast Hive Nexus and just barely succeeds thanks to the Resonance Barb, so he poaches the warriors' synaptic imperative of Goaded to Slaughter, which he will be giving to the Venomthroats for exploding 6s in melee. And he also drops Catalyst on them as well to keep them in place for as long as possible. The warriors use their adrenal glands and back off as quick as their little legs will carry them, and by moving into the corner, they keep the venom cannons on the intercessors and the death spitters on about 3 of the assault intercessors. The Venomthropes use their fly to float forward to ensure a guaranteed charge. Shoot in! The Death Spitters chuck out 15 corrosive maggots, +1 to hit, re-rolling 1s because of veteran, exploding 6s from Guide Mind. 16 hits, wounded on 3s, re-rolling 1s, which is perfect because I got 6 1s. Phew! That would have been a feeble start, and I need to do as much missile damage as possible before we get into bone swords versus chainsaws. You know, basically this scene from Space Marine 2. 10 wounding hits, 6 get through, and this takes out all 3 of the Marines that I can see. That couldn't have gone better. Not too much, not too little. 2 venom cannon from the warriors onto the intercessors. 4 poisonous, corrosive crystals fly forth. 4 hits and they all wound. 2 more guys go down. The Prime takes his venom cannon shot. 2 projectiles successfully hit and wound, but even with -3 AP, the Ceramite deflects both of them. The Venomthrope charge, and the captain performs a heroic intervention, so he doesn't get left out. But this does give me a chance to take him down, because the Venomthropes have received quite the buff. 4 hits on El Capitan, 2 up to wound, 3 go through, and only 1 save. But he gets a ghastly lungful of toxic miasma for a mortal wound. Ah, that wonderful stinky cloud. The rest, not a single 6, but 9 hits. 2 up to wound, 8 hits. 4 get through and take out 2 more Space Marines. But these Venomthropes aren't as stinky and fail to get the mortal wound. The Ultramarines fight back. The captain gets an extra attack for a total of 6 because he was charged. He dishes out 5 hits, 2 of them wound, armor blocks 1, catalyst fails the other, dropping the Venomthrope to 3 wounds. The rest of the Intercessor squad only get 2 wounding hits, and the chitin defences block both. The Primaris spend 2 command points for insane bravery to get an auto pass on their morale check, keeping them in place and also earning them a bunch more experience points.
No, only war!
The Assault Intercessors rage forward, and those chainswords don't look fun at all.
Just a suggestion! Perhaps you should flee!
The Intercessors open up with their pistols. One of them wounds a Venomthrope, but it bounces off of their chitin. The Assault Intercessors are about half an inch out of range for their crack grenade. Heavy bolt pistols score a hit and inflict another wound. Charge in. They need a 6 or more. And they get it, with a nice 10 on a dice roll. They have a sergeant in there with some heavy stuff, so as a precaution, up goes Reinforced Hive Node to reduce damage by 1 to a minimum of 1. A sea of dice rolls ensue as chainsaws go burr and Thunderhammer goes kasplat for a total of 10 wounds. 3 of the warriors go down. The warriors hoist their new and recently improved bone swords. Transhuman physiology goes up as a precaution, which I love. Less math for me to do. A straight up for the wound. The toxin sacks give me auto wound on a natural 6, and I get 6 of them, and another 10 hits on top of that. Re-rolling wound rolls of 1, and I get 12 wounding hits, and with 2 damage per hit, what gets through the armor is more than enough to erase them before they get another swing at me, which would almost certainly wipe out my warriors, leaving the Prime exposed to assassination. But I did have a plan for this. Now all of this depends on Octarius still being valid. I'll proceed as if it is. Turn 3, the Assault Intercessors finish the warriors and engage the Prime. Hopefully the restoratives in the Crusade mission, on a 6 he doesn't lose a wound and he regains a wound at the start of a turn. Keep him lasting until he can throw out a few swipes with the Reaper of Obliterax. He has 5 attacks, and each wounding hit does an additional mortal. Even so, turn 4 he dies, and when he goes down, the Leviathan strat of control of the swarm for a command point transfers Warlord status to the Neurothrope. The Venomthropes are keeping the Intercessors engaged, and their grasping tendrils should prevent anyone falling back and getting away. End of turn 4. Using Encircle the Prey, the Neurothrope leaves the field of battle, and in the reinforcements phase of turn 5, it pops up more than 9 inches from any enemy, which will be right in the back far corner, where he runs out the clock and gets bloody but unbowed for 50 victory points.
Would anyone care for fruit or dessert?
The Assault Intercessors are all dead. The Intercessors inflict 2 wounds on the Venomthrope, Catalyst fails, and a wound goes through. That Venomthrope attacks the Captain, getting 3 hits, 1 of which wounds. The other 2 throw out their tentacles, wounding 6 times. 2 armor saves, so 2 more Marines perish. The Captain attacks the Venomthrope that's bearing down on him and gets a wound in. All the usual buffs. The Neurothrope puts Guide Mind on the Venomthropes, the Tyranid Warriors and Prime all get Alpha Warrior, and I activate Goaded to Slaughter for everyone in Synaptic to get Exploding 6s in melee. The Warriors have adrenal glands, so they move 7 inches towards the remaining forces. If the Warriors can finish them, they'll meet the requirement for having taken out 3 entire units for extra experience points. The Neurothrope tries Paroxysm to reduce the chance of the Marines causing wounds, but it fails. Let's try Catalyst then. This also fails to go off. The Prime fires his Venom Cannon. 2 hits and a Marine goes down to remove Look Out Sir, and it gets me 10 victory points for my Warlord taking out a model. The rest of the Venom Cannon go for the Captain. 3 wounding hits, down he goes. 2 Death Spitters left, 6 shots. All 6 hit, 5s to save, and a Marine goes down, leaving a lone Sergeant still standing. Unfortunately, I'm completely out of charge range, but if I have the Venomthrope back off and let the Warriors finish them, I can get those extra experience points for a 3-unit kill tally. But you know what? Not worth the risk. The Sergeant stands his ground and does a wound on the alien menace surrounding him. The Venomthropes throw all of their tentacles his way. Exploding 6s give me more hits for a total of 8 wounding hits on 1 solitary Sergeant. My opponent rolls with a sense of futility. But the Emperor protects, and he saves all but 1. The Sarge still stands. He's on 1 wound, but he is still standing. But oh wait, it's the Venomthrope's fight phase, and the toxic miasma is in effect. On a 3, they inflict that one single wound that slays the very last of the Ultramarines. It all hinges here.
Alright, I just got to save on 7 of these.
AP minus 1.
Alright, let's see. AP minus 1. I'll save on 4s.
They remember the end of the last one. Oh my goodness.
Did I actually do it? He's alive.
I told you, the same thing happened at the end of the last battle.
He's barely alive. He's got
Okay.
one wound.
But on a 3+, he takes the mortal from the toxic miasma.
No.
There it is! Okay, the Tyranids defeat the drive to kill the Prime. Their new evolution proved extremely effective. I forgot the Leviathan 1 dice roll per unit reroll for the entire game, which is funny, because in our first game I forgot the Leviathan 6-up save for the entire game then as well. This engagement was always going to be quick and bloody, no matter what. With no objectives to slow units up, everyone was just thrown straight into the meat grinder. Being able to stay back and soften up with missile weapons and using the Venom Thrope to quickly bog down the intercessors so I could focus on the assault intercessors worked very well. The Tyranid warriors are really something to fear now, especially with Bone Swords doing 2 damage. Next battle, we rise up to 1,000 points, and we'll see how the Hive Tyrant, the Tyrant Guard, the Zoanthropes, and some Exocrine do with the new rules. And you know what? Really not missing the Hive Guard. It made this a far more enjoyable, up-close and personal ruck. None of that dull, raining down abuse from in hiding each turn to make up for the weakness of the main swarm. On Uldara's Haven, the Ultramarines dig in amongst the deserted industrial ruins that were scheduled as the location for their supply drop. No human could have covered the distance from the spaceport as they had, but the things pursuing them were also not human. The Tyranid swarm galloped over the hills, and a wave of Hormagaunts charged in, supported by withering artillery fire from the Hive Guard and deadly barrages from the Tyranid warriors. Shedding all hints of fear, the Primaris mounted a stalwart defense that held the advancing Tyranid at bay. Suddenly, the warriors charged Captain Caspeth and pierced him with devastating howls of death-spitter fire. Grievously wounded, Caspeth stood his ground as he was cocooned by the scything talons and flashing fangs of the Hormagaunts. As chitin blades pierced his armour and dug into his flesh, he was thrown to the ground to await the inevitable coup de grace. The pack closed in as a terrible, almost victorious shriek filled the air, but Caspeth suddenly realised that this was no Tyranid signal, but rather the sound of the supply pod howling down through the atmosphere. It slammed into the desiccated soil of the derelict planet, and the impact sent a wonderful shudder through the ground, a shudder that made hope feel possible. The Hormagaunts immediately looked to the Prime for confirmation as to their next act, and with a synaptic glance, they were redirected towards the pod. The captain watched with a grim mood as the creatures left their dread task of killing him undone, and instead bounded away. The entire swarm began to congregate on the last 2 of his battle brothers, still combat effective. Against such odds, there was clearly no chance of survival. Caspeth gave a proud nod of his head as the 2 men cut down every Hormagaunt with precise, measured strokes. But far more lethal bioforms were closing in rapidly, with bone swords raised. This, it seemed, was to be the end. He watched it occur in almost slow motion. The foul Hive Guard hoisted their weapons and let fly. The javelins of bone arced high into the air, the living component of each missile guiding it down over the ruins and down onto the last of his battle brothers. Taller than an Astartes, the lethal barrage howled down through the sky into their bodies. A chorus of tearing screeches echoed as each and every shard gouged into ceramite but ricocheted off to punch harmlessly into the ground. "The Emperor protects!" they yelled jubilantly into the Vox channel. The wail of denied missiles against armour was replaced by the roaring bellow of a Stormbird's engines. The craft swooped in low, snatched up the pod with superlative ease as the last of the Astartes grabbed what wounded they could and leapt onto the yawning embarkation ramp. "That he does," replied the captain. The Tyranids shrieked as they were denied their goal and could only watch, enraged, as the Ultramarine vessel banked sharply and cruised at low altitude, kicking up great swathes of dust to obscure vision while also enduring the brutal retaliatory strikes of the Hive Guard. The Tyranid warriors turned around and reversed their charge, but it was too late. Their own speed was their downfall. They had covered too much ground, and so the captain was grabbed and hauled aboard before they could reach the fleeing craft. The engines bellowed with fresh fury, and the Stormbird was away. Captain Kaspath looked down as the ramp gave a straining mechanical whine, its closure revealing 3 large, gaping holes ripped clean through it by the living projectiles of Impaler cannon. Just before the view of the battlefield was lost, for a brief moment, his eyes met the glowing, callous gaze of the Tyranid Prime, and he saw the malevolent intellect contained therein. "Captain, shall we set course for the dig site?" asked his sergeant, cradling his wounded arm. Kaspath removed his helm and jerked his stare around to fix his trusty comrade with a sanguinary glare. A scowl crossed his lips as an apothecary moved in and began to treat his wounds, the mechanized limbs assisting in repairing the worst of his traumas. "Not while that abomination down there draws breath. It will track us to the site and hound us to stop us completing our search. We regroup, turn back, and finish it." As the ministrations of the apothecary caused strength to once again flood back into his limbs, the captain arose. He strode to the supplies, threw open the doors to reveal the fresh ammunition and replacement war gear stowed within. "Replenish, brothers! We have an arch-fiend to slaughter! For Guilliman! For the Emperor!" And then he clasped a fist to his chest and spoke as a whispered private prayer, one filled with a fervid sense of reverence. "And for the prize!" The Tyranid Prime continued to oversee the harvesting of biomass and reflected upon what had occurred. A decision is then made, without care, without thought, without emotion. The Hive Guard have fulfilled their purpose. Their organic material is to be broken down and repurposed. The needs of the swarm are paramount, and so the hive mind sends a genetic imperative through every organism under its dominion. Every creature feels it, and their flesh immediately responds. The Prime feels its muscles solidify and grow powerful, its skin harden, even its bone swords hum with new potency. Clearly, the next engagement will be more personal. Restoratives and reinforcements have done their work. The Ultramarines are ready to fulfill Kaspath's orders. The Stormbird scans the land and locates a suitable location in which to spring their trap. A winding valley, carved by a long dried up river, perfectly funnels the approaching Tyranids into a series of ruins where the Astartes can wait and then pounce to decapitate the foe. Once situated, the only sound is the soft rustle of sand blowing through the blasted relics of a mining town. Then the deep, dull roar of pounding hooves begins to rise. From the valley pour forth the Tyranids, and it is immediately apparent that there has been a grave miscalculation. The lurching Hive Guard are gone, but floating abominations drift forward, surrounded by a grotesque cloud of vile, miasmic vapours. Also, the Tyranid warriors appear more robust, their chitin more dense, and their numbers have increased. Sensing the ambush, the Tyranids instantly stop, their hooves gouging long furrows in the ground as they counter their impetus and instead raise their vile bioweapons. Captain Kaspath knows he has to kill the abomination controlling this force and gives the order to advance. The assault intercessors leap from the ruins and begin closing in, chainswords roaring and bolt pistols raised. With his sergeant close by, the captain also leaps forth with the rest of the intercessors to provide support fire so that they can close the distance and tear the foe apart in close quarters. But with preternatural grace and speed, the Venomthropes drift over the broken buildings and engage his forces. Kaspath feels his skin crawl as psychic waves and the undeniable will of the hive mind's influence floods across the area. Hideous tendrils whip from the creatures, gouging at their armour. Casper throws himself into the fray to assist his men in purging these aberrations and feels the full fury of their noxious aura. The corrosive effects bring blood up from his lungs, and his Laraman's organ serves him admirably, and the flow clots and stalls almost immediately. Volleys of venom cannon and death spitter fire launch forth. The corrosive crystal shards of poisoned and acidic maggots fell in several marines as the Tyranid warriors slowly begin backing off, firing as they go. "Kill the beast!" Casper roars into the Vox, sensing the tide turning against them. Transhuman muscles burn and power armor whines as it is pushed to its limits. The assault intercessors slam into the foe, chainsaws cleaving through alien flesh. The initial attack caused significant fatalities, but then the bone swords began to fall. Where previously these vile weapons could slice open ceramite armor, now they were cleaving through an entire Astartes as though they were a guardsman. By the Emperor! What is this fell trickery? The last of the assault intercessors are thrown to the ground before the Tyranid warriors raise their guns and restore their bioweapon barrages on Casper's position. Once again, the gross issue of the venom cannon slam against his armor, knocking him to the ground as he watches the last of his troops fall. His sergeant remains aloft after withstanding a blizzard of lethal strikes from the venom throats, but then succumbs to the poisonous fumes exuded by the creatures. Suddenly, the Tyranids pause, as if called by some hidden command. A split second later they turn, and immediately bound away, heading deeper into the wasteland. The captain activates the Vox and calls for the Stormbird. Only one thing would have stopped the Tyranids from staying to harvest their biomass. There was a greater prize. They must have discerned the mission of the Ultramarines, and now, somehow, they know the possible location of the artifact. As the sound of the Stormbird's engines return, he begins issuing fresh orders. They need to recon the dig site. If there is any useful information there, it has to be acquired now before the Tyranids overwhelm the location. The Crusade continues.